So very quickly, I'm Tamra Monahan. I work at the museum here, and I'm just going to quickly talk about the most famous berry in Steamboat, which is strawberries, which was Strawberry Park. And if you've never heard, you've obviously heard of Strawberry Park, but some of you may or may not know how Strawberry Park got its name, and it basically was because of the Remington strawberry. And so most of the information that I got was from an oral history that was that we had recorded and written down by Grace Remington Lukens. And Grace Remington was the daughter of the guy, Remington, Lester Remington. Lester came to Steamboat in 1900 from Kansas. He was a failed farmer in Kansas. He told his family, "I'm tired of my crops dying, let's move to Steamboat," which I don't know if that was a really great idea if you're a farmer, but he moved to Steamboat and bought a 160-acre ranch out where Strawberry Park is now. Originally, it was called Cherries Park. It was named after a Swiss settler out there. Eventually, they changed the name to Strawberry Park. At first, Remington planted tomatoes, and I'm sorry, not tomatoes, potatoes. And he raised potatoes, and interestingly enough, he sold some in town. Most of them he put in a wagon, hitched it up to horses, and hauled it over Buffalo Pass to Laramie, Wyoming, because the prices were better over there and there was a better market over there. And if you can imagine going over Buffalo Pass with a wagon load of potatoes in the early 1900s, but that's what he did. The family also took the wild berries that they found and made jams and jellies and syrups, chokecherries, service berries, wild raspberries. And according to Grace, in 1903, her father discovered a strawberry patch in the middle of his Timothy hayfield. So the strawberries were there already. He didn't bring them. And these strawberries were huge and amazing. And so what he did is he started picking them, bringing them to town and selling them to people. And then eventually he just started planting sort of the runners from these more and more and more and more and more. The strawberries were really, really good. And some of them were about the size, the circumference, not round-wise, but the circumference of a tennis ball. And the way Grace described it is some of them would not fit into the top of an ordinary drinking glass. They were huge, absolutely huge. And there's a picture back there of a couple of them that are next to a silver dollar, and they're bigger than a silver dollar. So these berries were really big and super hardy. He called his strawberries the Remington berries after himself because he looked in catalogs and it was a unique variety. He could not find this variety anywhere. So he's like, hooray, I'm going to call these Remington strawberries. One of the things that, one of the important characteristics, according to Grace, was the berry's fruitage power. I've never heard that term before. But basically, most berries would come out and be done by May or June. These started coming out in June, and they would just keep producing berries all throughout the summer. And so when everybody else was done, Remington and all the farmers out there just kept picking him and picking him and picking him and picking him. He also had very little competition for his berries because they were really big and all the other berries were done, and his berries were the ones that just kind of kept going. So it really took off. At one time, Remington had 18 acres of strawberries out there. That's a lot of strawberries. The pickers were mostly local. They were mostly men, but there were some women and some kids. And if you read some of the, like I think Marcellus Merrill was one of them, Burroughs, they talk about their childhood, and they would go out there and make, for kids at the time, pretty big bucks. But it was very, very difficult. And a lot of them talked about, at first, you'd pick a few, you'd eat a few, you'd pick a few, you'd eat a few, and then somebody would come along and yell at you, and then you'd have to stop eating and start picking or whatever, you know, so, because they were pretty strict about that. The pickers would make $5 to $6 a day. It was 1 to 2 cents per quart box. Remington even made his own quart boxes and crates. I could never figure out why. Grace just said, we made our own. Do you have any idea why? Yeah, they just made their own.
Because you couldn't get them hauled.
I'm going to say, where would you get them if you didn't make them?
That's true, probably, yeah. When the railroad came to Steamboat in 1908, wow, the strawberries just took off, because then they not only had a local market, but they had a market that they could ship it to. And according to Grace, her father shipped it, and the other farmers shipped berries to Denver, Omaha, Chicago, and other major cities. And the size of the berry made it better. It could ship longer than these little teeny tiny berries. The first shipment was 1,500 crates. which is absolutely amazing. This is according to Grace, in the early 1900s. And one interesting thing, Grace said that they would haul the berries in a wagon with horses, but when they had to haul them down to the train, he had to buy, she said a vehicle, I'm sure it was a truck, because they tried to take the horses to the train, but it was so loud and the horses were just terrified of the train noise. And she said it was really hard to control the horses and make sure that the berries didn't fall out of the back. So it was kind of this thing, so he's like, forget it. So he just bought a truck. According to the Historic Guide to Routt County, when the railroad created a really big demand for strawberries, the land prices in Strawberry Park jumped from, this is amazing, $500 an acre to $1,500 an acre. So it just went way, way, way up because they realized the specialized nature of the Remington berry. Remington also sold runners, and he would pack these, he and his family would pack them in soil in the quart boxes, and he would sell these runners all over the United States. Grace talks about doing that with her brothers and sisters for their dad. A 1909 Steamboat pilot article on the Remington and his berries stated, the crop this year has been above average. It is stated by Remington that his crop will net him $5 to $6 per crate. From present indication, 1,000 acres will be put to strawberries in this next section. 1,000 acres is just incredible to me. I mean, if you see pictures, it's just, you know, strawberry field after field after field. In 1911, the Steamboat Springs Produce Association was established, and it was Produce Association, but it was mostly strawberries. And according to Grace, in that same year, the profit from the association was $4,804.45. I don't know how she knew that exact amount, but that's what she said. Plus 700 crates sold locally. A pamphlet printed by the association in 1912 stated, this is great, I love this. Not only is the success of strawberry growing in Steamboat Springs amazing to horticulturists on account of the altitude, but the favorable conditions under which the fruit is raised have made experience in other fields of little avail. There is no spraying because there are no diseases to attack the plants. There is no mulching because the heavy snows of winter act as a natural mulch. There is no resetting every third year in some parts, for one patch has been in production for over 6 years and is as thrifty and productive as ever. Now granted, it's a pamphlet, so pamphlets are propaganda, but I think most of that is pretty much true. The pamphlet also stated that the first strawberry plants out there were brought from by settlers from Boulder County in the late 1800s. I think they said 1892. So they brought them out there, they planted them in their gardens, and then they kind of shared them, and then they just started taking off on their own. And then when Remington found it, he's the one who really made it successful. And very quickly. Unfortunately, in 1914 and 1915, Grace said that a change in the weather plus increasing competition in the strawberry market was pretty much the doom for the Remington strawberry. Each of those summers had killing frosts, and it killed off almost all of the crops, and he just couldn't get it going again. So what he did is he sold his ranch in Strawberry Park, and he bought a grain farm at the top of 4 Mile Hill. Anybody know where 4 Mile Hill is? You know, don't you, Linda? You know everything. I've never heard of 4 Mile Hill or anything. He had the grain farm for 3 years, and after that he sold the farm and moved to Arizona. I think he was just like, the heck with this, I'm just going somewhere warm. And although Lester Remington left Steamboat, the legend of his gigantic Remington berries and the name Strawberry Park stuck. And as far as I know, there are no big, huge commercial anything out there. Even who does the farming out there? Elkstone, yeah. So people may have strawberries, but they're not the big, huge, gigantic Remington strawberries.
So they never came back then?
Not really, yeah. I mean, maybe they came back as smaller strawberries, but those big, hardy strawberries never came back after that. So that's probably more information that you ever wanted to know about Strawberry Park. I'm going to hand it over to, who wants to go next?
Cool, I'll introduce.
Okay, Nancy. And I do want to say, we're talking about 2 books, this book and the Fair Family Cookbook we have for sale in the store.
Nice. Thanks, Tamra. She's always great to pull all of us together to share some knowledge and dig in. And so the first person that is going to help us today is Libby Christensen. She is she would be the FCS agent at the Extension Office, but I can't remember what that acronym is, so I kind of consider her like a lifestyle specialist and coach, because she knows, she's got everything going on from food safety to healthy lifestyles to, you name it, and the Extension Office has got it with Libby. So Libby Christensen is here with CSU. Can you hit the lights?
See.
Right there. Yeah. Perfect.
We'll
do our best.
We'll do our best, and now I can talk to it. Thank you, Nancy.
Yes.
As Nancy explained, I'm from the Extension Office. Does everybody know what Extension is? Can you raise your hand if you've ever been in the Extension Office?
Been in it?
Okay, I can talk a little bit about. So we are an extension of Colorado State University. I think every state in the union has a land-grant university that studies agriculture, and the extension system is located in each county across the country to try and bring the knowledge and ideas of the university to the people. In the same way, we also bring ideas and questions from the people back to the university. So over time, our responsibilities and roles have changed, but still to this day, one of our key roles is kind of this lifestyle, answering questions, providing training, and we try and really bring research-based knowledge and information to the community. So we organize the Master Gardener program. So if you are interested in trying to bring the Remington strawberry back to Steamboat and you're a little intimidated by the 59 days of growing, our office can help train you to know a little bit more about the conditions that are here, and also unite you with other people that are really excited about growing things. There was a lot of talk about strawberries, but I don't know how many people actually know how strawberries grow. So usually there's a mother plant, and then there are offshoots that are created, daughters that are created, and so that's what the Remingtons would sell to other people. So those are kind of like tips and tricks that the Extension Office can really provide. In addition to our Master Gardener program, we also do the 4-H program. So it's one of the largest, or it's I think the largest youth program in the county. We work with 300 youth in the county across the entire area, from everything from raising cattle and sheep to, we've got a robotics program. So we have 35 youth in that robotics program. So I was programming little Lego robots last night. So we really kind of do the whole gamut with them. In addition, we've got the Master Food Safety Advisors, which Linda and Nancy are both a part of, fantastic volunteers. And so we in our office provide a training on food preservation and basic food safety training, and then do workshops. So we are going to do a pickling beet workshop. Linda and I will do a pressure canning workshop. So if you're interested in canning meat, and don't know where to start, we've got that as well. So I've got cards up here, and so if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. And so kind of in the spirit of research and wanting to make sure and talking about berries, it can be a little intimidating to like go out and harvest some berries. So I thought maybe we should do some of the how to use them and some of the do's and don'ts of berries. So in the back, Linda has some chokecherries that she brought. I brought some hawthorn berries and then sarvis berries as well, just so you can taste them and see them. If you are interested in foraging, I strongly encourage you to buy this book. This is an incredible resource. It has, and it's also, when my husband and I were pretty avid hikers, and when we bought this book, it opened up a whole new world of hiking. Like hiking, you're like walking around and you're getting your exercise, and then you see this whole new world of possibilities open. And in Steamboat, as we all know, we're so lucky, but Karen Vale lives here, and she will do foraging tours with Yampatika in the summertime. They also do a whole foraging dinner as a fundraising, and so if you're really excited about this, there's so many opportunities in this community, but this is really kind of the basic Bible from starting.
Is that a Colorado book or for anywhere?
It is specifically for alpine what is it called?
Biospheres.
Yes. Biomes. So it's in Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, as well as Idaho, and they give the geographic distribution of the plants that they're talking about and the kind of landscapes. But because Karen is from this community, she'll reference like Rabbit Ears Pass or Buff Pass in here to give you a little bit more,
So Karen wrote the book.
Yeah, she's one of the authors. She's co-author. So kind of the do's and don'ts of harvesting berries and any kind of foraging, be it mushrooms, botanicals, whatever. Be courteous. If you are on a private property, make sure you check in with the landowner to let them know that you're going to be there. It's also really good practice to share your bounty. So if you do pick sarvice berries, I would encourage you not to give them a bucket of sarvice berries. If you go home and make something like one of these amazing dishes, that you share that product, because that really is the love that you're given. Be respectful, don't leave trash, try not to damage plants, bring a guidebook, as I said. And if you are going to go on public lands, know the law. So most places, as long as you're not doing commercial harvesting, so you're not planning on selling whatever you're harvesting, then you're usually pretty good. And also kind of quantities. So as long as you're not taking 30 barrels of sarvice berries, you should be okay. But if you want to start going in larger quantities, you just have to pay the Forest Service a fee, and they will work out kind of what that fee is. It's like $5 for a bucket if you're going commercial. They also do it with mushrooms. Don't eat what you don't know. There are things that can kill you. That is important. So if you don't know it, don't eat it. And also it's really good to go with somebody that really knows what they're doing. There's also a number of poisonous plants that grow in this community, particularly around waterways, that can have negative impacts on surrounding plants. So it's important for you to be able to identify those poisonous plants. So if you see like a berry bush that's growing right next to it, you don't want to harvest those berries, because there's some toxins that can cross over in that root system. Also, kind of in that same vein, you don't want to harvest near roadways or train tracks. Like train tracks are really bad toxins, and so both in terms of the stuff that they put into the tracks, but also just because of the diesel fumes. So you don't want to harvest right next to them. Don't forget your surroundings. Has everybody read The Sal and Blueberries, the book? I've got a 2-year-old, so I read small books. And it's a mother and her child go out blueberry harvesting, and at the same time there's a bear and her cub that are going blueberry harvesting, and at some point the children switch, and it's a fantastic story. But you're excited about this, the bears are excited. Also know the time of year, so particularly like right at the end of winter when the bears are coming out of hibernation, they can be a little bit hungry. They're hangry, and so you want to avoid those times in terms of harvesting. So just to go over some of the most common, and these are really bad pictures, or they're good pictures, you just can't see them. Sarvice berries, they are all in this book, so there's 2 copies around here. I also have a wild berry guide from Wyoming that is a pretty good resource, as well as this native fruit. I only printed 1 copy of that one, but if you contact me, I can definitely get you another one of that. And this is the Fruit of the Labor. It's a little outdated, but is a good starting place in terms, but it's not colored photos, so that's one issue. So sarvice berries in other parts of the country, they're called service berries, because of our river, that's what we call them here. They kind of look like blueberries, they're bush-like, and for the most part, we were talking earlier, they don't necessarily, and they'll go into more detail about this, they don't necessarily have a huge amount of flavor. They can be a little gritty. If you harvest them after the first frost, usually they're better. The sugars in them develop a little bit more. My dog loves them. I don't know why. He will sit and eat a sarvice berry bush for hours. But it can hurt your tummy if you eat too much of it, is also an important thing to know. And you can freeze them, you can eat them fresh, you can put them in pancakes. And Linda and Nancy will talk more about what those are. Other options. Chokecherries, we've got examples in the back. Chokecherries. These are really tart products, foods, and so usually you have to put them in something else to sweeten them up. Late summer, early fall, you again want to go after that first frost. That's really when the sugars are at their peak. And so there's some identifying characteristics, again, they go over in the book about, they're kind of these shrubby things with oval leaves with small serrations on the side, and these really beautiful like cone-shaped flowers. And so one of the other good things about going on with the book or with the hikes is that you kind of see the plant progress over time, and so you can feel more confident about that you're harvesting the plant that you think you are, because each of those give you a little bit more information to make sure your identification. You can also do currants and gooseberries. Here, there's a bunch of different types that grow in this region. And the important things is there's this little pigtail at the end of it. And if you see the pigtail, if you see the pigtail, you're safe. And so those are delicious, really good to eat in the field. Gooseberries. Jams, jellies, syrups, all those kind of things. We also have wild raspberries growing around here. And so most of us know what a raspberry plant looks like. The thing that I have the hardest time, and I'd be curious for y'all to give an opinion, is that they're very tiny and they're very delicate, and so if you harvest them, they just kind of in your hand.
Touch it, it goes.
Yeah. So they're delicious. You just like pop them immediately in your mouth, but it's really hard to do any kind of food preservation with it. And so, and the last is a number of other resources. My phone number and email, which is also on the card if anybody has any questions. And also, if you are interested in this subject, I would really suggest looking at the Amphitheca. We'll put out their calendar about their foraging, and it's really fun.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
So, are there any kind of general, so let's just say you don't have the book, general rules of thumb, white berries, no. And then obviously mountain ash, extremely poisonous, but looks like a nice bright red berry that you should harvest.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. But are there any kind of rules of thumb beyond white is a no-no?
The rule of thumb is don't eat it if you don't know it. that is the rule of thumb. And so unless you feel really confident, and there are tons of people in this community that are very knowledgeable, and so just go with a buddy. It's the same as like going in the backcountry. Like if you don't know where you're going, don't do it unless you have a guide. And so that's the same kind of thing with food. So that's my spiel.
Yay.
Yay. Awesome. So that's how you get the berries and all of the fun stuff. And then what you do next with it is kind of where I come in. So cool thing in this little, in this publication that we did for the 2014 fair and the 100th anniversary of the fair, there is a whole section called This and That. And in the back we have a few different canning recipes. And the cool thing is that canning recipes haven't changed a whole lot, but we do mark some of them as historic because the piece about canning is that it has evolved as fruit has changed and acidities and that kind of thing, and so it's really processing times. So, but there are lots of recipes in here, and I know someone was asking about using honey as a sugar source versus the 7 cups of sugar in a recipe of jam. And there is a strawberry honey preserves recipe in here that uses just honey as a sweetener. All sorts of things like zucchini jam. Anybody ever have the desire to make zucchini jam? Okay, well, in the height of summer you might, because you're looking for things to do with that zucchini. So anyway, there's lots of different, in the very back of this, there's some fun recipes, but including sarvisberry and some of the wild berries. So the piece for me is that, and I think Linda will concur, and Libby said it too, these are wild berries. They may not have a ton of pure flavor, if we lived in Montana and had some of those great cherries that were, or even in Delta County or something like that, where we had some of those fruits that have their own flavor. So a lot of times we end up doing things with these berries that are creative. And so in my canning world, I'm a master food safety advisor, and so I've learned how to can and to share my canning knowledge with lots of folks. And so that's part of my world. So so we have all sorts of great recipes that work for us, but there's also some skills and techniques that we like to share. So if you get chokecherry, you might get chokecherry juice. And this is something I canned for the fair because last year I was in a mode of entering as many entries as I could in the fair because I was after the Helen Sherrod Award. So in any case, I canned chokecherry juice, and I labeled it correctly, and it has all of the stuff. But the chokecherry juice in my mind was that I was going to use this in the middle of winter to make some kind of syrup or jelly or whatever. So I canned the chokecherry juice, and this is kind of interesting because I'll show you the chokecherry syrup that I made. So the chokecherry syrup, you can see it's pretty and it's clear and it's great. The chokecherry juice, you can see, has a little bit of this residue in the bottom. So that's the pieces why you're using, I just I just basically boiled down all the choke cherries, got the juice out of it, and then when I make it into syrup, it'll turn clear like this, and there's no residue. So I'll pass these two around. Like I say, you can note that when we enter canning in the fair, we have a special way to label it so that the judge is assured that it's safe, and that's why we're kind of trying to pass that word along. Is that you don't just at this altitude, you don't just boil things for 5 minutes and say, great, put me on the shelf for 5 years. It's not that kind of thing. So that's part of what the fair does, is pass some of that knowledge on. So in any case, pardon?
Did you win?
I actually did win the award. I did.
Are you going to tell us
This
how
is
many
my
things you
award.
ate? Nancy, are you going to share how many cherries you ate?
So here's the deal. The Helen Sherrod Award is it's the most blue ribbons that whoever has the most blue ribbons for any entry for all the entries at the fair gets this Helen Sherrod Award, because Helen Sherrod was this amazing homemaker and she was very versatile that way. So I made and entered 72 things. Because I had a goal. I started the day after fair. And I said, okay, I made lists of things I could make, and I just said, okay, my goal is blue ribbons, and I got 52 blue ribbons. And honestly, it was really just that my peers at the fair were like, Nancy, you should go for this. You could do it. So the first year I just kind of do what I normally do, which is throw everything I can find in the car, and I got 35 blue ribbons, and the person who won it had gotten 38 blue ribbons. And so then I realized that this was something I needed to attack. I was I needed a plan, and so my goal was to have an entry for every week of the year. And so when I gathered them all up,
So how many did second place put in?
I don't know.
Don't give that information out.
Yeah. And the only reason I know that I had 52 and that I had 72, I counted up my entries when I pulled off my things, but then you get $1 for every blue ribbon, and so then when I collected I went to the window and didn't collect my money, but I was like, oh, I got 52 blue ribbons, because I would have had $52 had I. Anyway, it was, so that's a side note. There we go. In any case, the thing about all these wild berries is that you have to think about all the wild berries we have. So all the things that Libby mentioned are true, but there's lots of local fruits that we do things with. Yeah. So rhubarb. Rhubarb is, it's been here since the pioneers. You used to be able to find homesteads by rhubarb plants. And so rhubarb is something that's really easy to preserve, to put in your freezer and then bring it out in January and make strawberry rhubarb jam, because we can always get strawberries at the grocery store if we don't grow them and freeze them in the summer. I don't have a strawberry patch. I do have a raspberry patch. My raspberries are, like Libby said, I have pictures on my phone, and they're typically like, this is my harvest, like this much, and I always take a picture of oh my God, that's my year's harvest. This year was a little bit better crop, and so I had this great opportunity to make apricot raspberry jam, because my friend in Hayden also had homegrown apricots, and they were the size of my thumb. So I got pounds of these little tiny apricots and my locally harvested raspberries, and I made an apricot raspberry jam, and I entered it in the fair, and it was just like this. For me, that's the kind of stuff that I want to put in a jar, is stuff that I have and I can't reproduce it any other time. So and again, you can see how we label our stuff. So there's apricot raspberry.
Judges actually open these and try them?
They do not try. It depends on the judge what her preferences are. I've only had female judges, but they don't often do that. They're looking at consistency, how it is canned and what the head space, if it's correct and safe, and then a lot of those kind of things are what they're looking for. So they don't typically do that. Many times judges will taste pickles, because
And the jams is what.
and
Everything else is not.
Yeah, and so, but we also have the big cans of apples and cans of, those kind of things. They don't necessarily open those, but they do taste some of the jams. Again, it depends on the judge, but so flavor is some of it. So the other piece then is that we resort to, as canners, when you have like chokecherries or any of these other wild berries, especially like sarvisberries, Linda and I joke that it kind of tastes like dirt if you just made just sarvisberry jam, or sometimes they don't have that kind of flavor. So the trick is triple berry jam, okay? So I made this yesterday, so it doesn't, I don't have any harvest berries or anything in my freezer, but I did blackberries and raspberries and blueberries. But I would typically, that's how I would use a harvest berry in my world, because I love jams and jellies because they're so versatile. You can use jams and jellies not just on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You can put it in your meat marinades. You can use it in a trifle. You can top brownies with it. I mean, there's just a million things that you can do with that. So I made a triple berry jam, and you can kind of see if the mix of berries, you want to have just the right number of seeds, right? So you don't want to, when you do raspberry jam, you make all this, you use all these raspberries. Well, you take the pulp and the seeds out of it and only use a third of those, because otherwise you got seeds and all that stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the mix of triple berry jam, is to get just the right number of those seeds. So, you know, that's why you mix in like blueberries or strawberries or something like that with the other fruits that have lots of seeds. So here's some triple berry jam, and this jam is back there too, just a jar of it. And then I just thought I'd also show, so again, the fruits of our labor, that's, you know, this is my copy of the book. I'm pretty, like, I'm not letting it out of my sight. But I also look to see if in some of our you know, natural, these are just resources that every canner would have access to. This is the Ball Blue Book, and they don't deal with wild berries. Like, I can't look under W and look for wild berries or chokecherries, but I can see rhubarb. And I can see, you know, some of the things that we would do with apples. Has anyone ever harvested local apples? Yeah, see, so Junior Bedell calls me whenever he has a crop and says, come up and get them. And I go up there and there's a big bag of these apples, and they're, you know, they're great. It's something fun. You know, this year the ladies at the Methodist Church made all these apple pies, and so I collected all the peels and the cores, and I made apple juice out of it and made different kinds of, well, I did apple jelly, but I really wanted to make mint jelly because I wanted something for lamb. And the other piece I wanted, truth be told, is I wanted to make a mojito kind of simple syrup and can that. So I used all those apple peels to do some of that. So anyway, those are not necessarily recipes you're going to find in your Ball Blue Book, but you might have something that you can transfer. And we also have some of these great resources for wild berries. So again, this kind of cookbook doesn't have it, but these homegrown cookbooks like the fall, they're like the Fair Family Favorites cookbook, has some of those recipes. And then I also just was going to mention that, so, you know, the other piece, that these aren't necessarily recipes that you're just going to be able to, like strawberries you can do without pectin, that kind of thing, but these are recipes you're going to need to use some of your pectins. So like this instant pectin, this is for freezer jams. It's a great way to use some of these other things. Like if you want to do a triple berry jam and making it into a freezer jam, makes it easy. You don't have to have a canner. I mean, if you just want to make it up some Sunday afternoon and then put, you know, a few jars in your freezer, you know, we get some freezer jars. They have great little lids on them. It's easy peasy. And then just some pectin, that's freezer jam pectin. So that's that. And then there's the traditional pectin, which they now make, if you're using Ball, they make this in stuff so you can just, it actually has like a pretty generic recipe right on the, you know, so you say, oh, we need, you know, however many cups of fruit, this many cups of sugar, this many whatever. And then another person in the crowd also asked about low sugar. There's low sugar pectins too, which is really nice to have that option, so you're not feeling like, you know, so a normal recipe has like 7 cups of sugar and you get 7 or 8 jars of jelly out of it. So that's, you know, but if you use a low sugar pectin, you're going to have 4.5 cups of sugar. So it basically decreases it. And then Libby and I did a youth canning workshop, and what did we discover? That the amount of fruit, the largest amount of fruit and flavor was really in freezer jam, right? Yeah, so if you want to control some of those, that's that. These are here, they're not very interesting, but if you're ever interested in that, there's that. And then, and I also was just going to share, so, you know, like this blue book, I just got the updated one at Ace. You might have one of these that your grandmother had, and that's really fun, and you should keep it and store it as a treasure. But the updated recipes are in this kind of a book because, like, the recipes haven't changed because because Grandma liked something different than what we liked, but the vegetables and the fruits have changed, and so using an updated recipe just ensures that, you know, things are going to stay great in the jar for a long time. So there's this one. There's also this if you want something kind of sassier. I took, you can tell I was preparing for my Helen Sherrod year. I can't believe I actually copped to that, but that was truly my plan. So this one is as evolved enough to say that there's strawberry rhubarb recipes, right? So they are embracing rhubarb, and you can actually buy rhubarb in City Market and Safeway.
Or find a friend who is.
Oh, you can definitely find a friend. You're more likely to find a friend with zucchini to make zucchini jam than you are rhubarb. But they're even, I mean, I've never made rhubarb jelly, but rhubarb jelly might be a thing. I made a rhubarb rosemary syrup the other day, which was kind of fun. So some of these books are, you know, they have some more fun options than just your basic strawberry jam. So it's kind of fun to look around and see what else is out there, especially if you're kind of a canning nerd like I have become. And so, in terms of the different options, like I say, I just kind of like to look and see what else there is, and sometimes there's no better gift for me as a canner than to share some of the bounty of what I might get off the roadsides or in my neighbor's yard than to give them, you know, a jar of you know, triple berry jam or whatever that looks like. In fact, my husband, who makes fun of me for becoming his mother, he's like, you are just like my mother, you can, like, oh, and I'm like, yes, I know, but he's the first one to make sure that there's like 50 jars of jam to donate to the Methodist Ladies Fall Fair, that there's, you know, jars of jam at every moment to give to colleagues for Christmas gifts, for all this stuff. So I laugh at him, but I'm like, I think it's a backwards pat on the back. Okay. So, in any case, if you get a chance to find local apricots, those are a cool find. Although most of them, I would say 90% of them is the Big Pit. The flavor on them is really fun, and I've never ever gone to get crab apples, but I know there are trees even up at CMC. So there's those kind of things around, and I think it's cool that we are able to do that. And I've never heard of a hawthorn berry, so I'm going to go back there and check that out. Awesome. All right. So,
can I just add something?
yes.
We have 2 crabapple trees right here in the front of the museum, and an apple tree in the backyard here on the parking lot. So if anybody is looking to harvest something because you just have nothing and maybe you didn't do the chokecherries, feel free to come by.
That's
in the
awesome.
fall.
And we'll ask permission first. So. Yay.
And people have come. They come all the time. Someone came a couple years ago and harvested the apples and made an alcoholic cider.
Oh, very
and
fun.
so there's, you know, so we're kind of we can be a provider of stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. So one of the people who really has inspired me over the years is our Linda Long, and Linda she just has this breadth of knowledge that just flows out of her, and she shares it with a smile and with and she's also very detail oriented, so much that it's like she's not like, so my mother-in-law has all these great recipes in her head, like I never, you know, can get her to write them down, but Linda is like the person who has all these great recipes and she writes them down and they're typed up, like, you know, so when I was making my apricot, I was making pineapple apricot, because I have all these apricots, pineapple apricot jam, and I was like, and we were on our way down to buy fruit in Grand Junction or in Palisade, and she's like, oh, use that, and I was like, I have that recipe, and it had all these great little tips inside the recipe, so she's an amazing resource, and so she's going to tell us more, share more. Hey.
Nancy, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
So the apricot, so your neighbor or friend has all these apricot bushes or trees?
Yeah, she
They
has trees in Hayden.
Oh, it's a little warmer there.
And they are old trees, so they've been around for a long time. So when we found out that this friend of ours bought the Wixom place, we're like, oh, and then she had a plethora of this crop, and we're like, can we buy some, Tegan? And she was glad to get rid of it. She was excited, and so they picked their buns off, and we bought her stuff. Yes, it was fun.
Well, I think Nancy and Libby have covered about everything. I mean, how many things can you say about a berry, you know? So I think they've covered most everything. So I'm going to kind of just cover, what do you do with them after you've picked them? Other than making the jams and jellies. So they mentioned this morning that I brought a cobbler in. I kind of unprofessionally didn't type it
Oh,
this
well.
morning. I just wrote it down because I had to do a lot of shoveling this morning to get here. So I just wrote it down because I really don't have a recipe. This recipe was one that you learned on Grandma's elbow. You know, you just stood there and watched Grandma keep doing it and everything, and it was always the go-to for everything. If we were in the hayfield or branding or something like that, we would just make a cobbler or some kind of a dish out of whatever we had left. So we would, when we got the freezers going, we froze the berries because chokecherries come on, sarvisberries come on, raspberries come on. I'm in the hayfield, and I don't have time right now to make all this jams and jellies and all this kind of stuff. So my grandparents, my mom, and all my aunts, we would just wash the berries, and so like the chokecherries, I'm just going to take the chokecherries. The chokecherries, we'd go out and we'd pick buckets of chokecherries. We would come in and we would use ice water. We always washed them down 3 different times at least, depending on where we picked them and how they were. But we would wash them down like 3 different times in this ice water, and then we would lay them out on a cookie sheet, and we'd lay them in the deep freeze and freeze them just on the cookie sheet. And then as soon as they were frozen, then we would bag them, and we'd usually put them in a couple pound or 2-gallon bags. And the reason that we did that is because like 2 gallons will make about 4 batches of chokecherry jam in January, maybe February, you know, when we have more time. But in September, when all this stuff is coming on and so fruitful, we're also putting up our hay, you know, so we didn't have time to do that. So that's what we did. When I've got these recipes here that I've shared with Extension Office, and so they're available at the Extension Office. But if you go to Certo, which there's different things that we can do when we're doing our canning. We can use Sure Gel, we can use, there's several different brands. But Certo is the box liquid. I have found it's almost, I never have a batch that doesn't turn out. And if it does, you get the syrup. But I've never had any trouble when we started using the Certo. And in the Certo, I think there's some of these to pass around.
Yes.
In the Certo box, it actually does have a recipe for chokecherries and wild berries. And it's in there, and by using the liquid, I have never had any trouble having the jam set up. And so it's not like a surefire 100%, but it's pretty high results on it. So I put that in there so that they would have it as an Extension Office, and it does work pretty well. So the cobbler that I brought today is a cobbler that my grandmother always went to. You can mix all your different fruits and your berries. You can have, like this cobbler that I made today, I've got raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries in this particular one. But if I had peaches at home, fresh, and you can use this fresh or frozen or canned. So it's kind of like the go-to dessert, you know, I mean, if you wanted it, and you can also serve it leftovers in the morning for breakfast. But it's, you can mix all of your peaches with raspberries and everything. It makes a beautiful cobbler out of that. So those are the things that we would do with it. And it was something that we had available when we were in the country. Back when I was growing up, we didn't get to go to the grocery store every day or every week or anything like that. So it was what we had on hand. So these are the recipes that we would use from that. So it's those kind of things that what do we do with the berries and things after we've gotten them picked, or, you know, and if we don't just make jams and jellies out of them, what else can we do? So that's kind of what I was going to touch on today.
Tell them about chokecherries though, because I think people think that you can use chokecherries like to make a chokecherry pie or something. What does that look like?
Not very well.
Pretty awful.
It's pretty sour. Most any of the berries that I work with, especially like the sarvisberries or even the chokecherries, if you're trying to do something else with them, is add something else to them. If you want to use the sarvisberries, my dad had the greatest recipe, never failed, you know, and we thought it was all right when we were kids growing up. Now that I look back at it and see all the other varieties that we have, it's like, and we really did eat that. So, but what we would do is we would add those little crab apples that are really, really, really tart, and we would add those to the sarberberries, and you'd be surprised. It really does sharpen that flavor and really does bring it out.
Lemon juice.
Well, you always put the lemon juice in anyway, just because you need that acid for the preservation of it. But it's those kind of things, you know, and so just kind of get creative with it, you know. If you have a certain flavor that you like, try it and see if you like it even better, you know, when you've added something to it. But the sarberberries are just pretty bland, and so anything that you can add to them that helps. Chokecherries are pretty tart, so you need to have something that kind of calms that tartness down, you know. So
Do you have to pit chokecherries to?
Yes.
So, and they're tiny.
So when the other thing that's really good about the frozen berries is if you're putting them up in September and trying to make jam out of them and get them to the juices, it takes about 3 days for that process to work. And because you pick them, you wash them, and you know, get them cleaned up, put them on the stove and you boil them to where all that meat and your juices fall off. Then it takes another almost 24 hours of you straining it through several layers of cheesecloth for it to come out to be a real pretty clear jelly or something that goes into your jars. So it takes almost 3 days for us to do it that way.
It's a labor of love.
Second reason I don't have time in the hayfield, you know. So, but it's the same process in the wintertime. If I'm doing it now, I only brought a few berries because I've got a couple gallons at home, but I need to make the jams and jellies, and this is when I do it. So, but when I bring it in and it's frozen like this, that meat falls right off of that seed so well after they've been frozen. You'd be surprised how much better your juice will be. And so that's when I do it anyway. So, yes.
Explain what you do with the meat instead of just throwing it away.
I feed it back to the birds that they shared with me in spring or in the fall. You can make jam. Jelly is your clear juices. Your jams are your meats and different things that come off of your berries and off of your fruits, the skins and those kind of things. So when you're doing up a jam, you could use those skins. You could use that meat off of there. But it's going to be pretty tart still when you do that.
I thought it was interesting that you just, instead of throwing it down the sink or throwing it in the trash, you give it back to the birds
and they love it now.
Share it with nature. I mean, you know, it's like, you're taking some of the berries away from the birds, or you know, whatever. So yeah.
I'm sure if the bear was out of hibernation, he would love it too. I just set it out in a pie pan and let them go after it again, so they enjoy it. But the being frozen, it does let the meats and everything fall off of the seeds really well. So is there any other questions that any of us can answer?
I just have a comment. When we lived in Michigan, outside of the Detroit area, we had a beautiful flowering tree by our front door, and then they had red berries in the fall, and the birds would come and get the berries, but they must have been fermented because the birds would get
go crazy.
You could tell they were acting different.
Oh yeah.
Chokecherries also in the valley.
I never tried any of them because I
get calls. I get a lot of calls. Because I've heard of it.
Chokecherries in the valley have a big competition for making wine. There's an awful lot of people that like to make the wine.
I just had a quick question. Libby had mentioned that when you eat too many sarberberries, you can get a belly ache. And is there a little bit of a is it the tannins in it, or is there a little bit of toxicity, or?
It's a little bit of toxicity in the skins that gets put down when you cook it.